Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we dig into the source material so you don't have to, turning all those complicated spec sheets and reviews into something, well, actually useful.
Yeah, something you can act on.
Exactly. And today, wow, we are looking at a huge shakeup in the compact cinema camera market. I mean, it feels like things changed almost overnight.
Oh, it's definitely a seismic shift. For quite a while, Sony's FX line, the FX3 especially, it was pretty much the undisputed king in that professional full-frame compact space.
Right. It set the standard.
It did. But the game has totally changed now. We saw the Nikon ZR and the Canon C50 launch almost back-to-back.
The 1-2 punch week, as our sources are calling it.
Precisely. And it's forced everyone, manufacturers and filmmakers alike, to really rethink what a professional camera in this category even means anymore.
Okay, so let's unpack that. Let's introduce the main players here. We're focusing on 4 key full-frame video cameras today, but, and this is crucial, they're all built for really different ways of working.
Totally different philosophies.
So, based on the sources, we've got the established benchmark, the Sony FX3, reliable, known quantity.
Yep.
Then the new kid on the block, the Nikon ZR, very aggressive on value.
The disruptor, absolutely.
Then there's the Canon C50, which seems like a highly specialized tool focused on workflow.
Efficiency is its middle name.
And finally, Sony's other contender, the ZV-E1, super mobile, more of a creator-focused camera.
Right, the ultra-compact option.
So our mission today, it's not just about comparing specs like resolution or frame rates. That's kind of the old way of looking at it.
Exactly. We need to figure out which camera offers the best value. But value isn't just the sticker price anymore. It's all about the workflow philosophy behind the camera and what we call the total cost of ownership, the TCO.
Right. So the big question we need to answer looking at all this material is, how does the camera that looks cheap up front,
like the ZV-E1 or maybe the ZR.
Yeah, how does that sometimes end up being the most expensive solution when you factor in everything else on, say, a big commercial project with lots of deliverables?
And on the flip side, how can that camera, with the really high initial price tag, maybe the C50 or the FX3, actually save you money in the long run? Less time wasted, less risk, less stress.
Okay, so let's ground this. Let's start with the prices, just the basic cost of the body, because that sets the stage. There are pretty clear tiers here.
Yeah, 3 distinct levels, which already tells you something about who they're aimed at.
Okay, at the very entry point for this kind of full-frame 10-bit video capability, you've got the Sony ZV-E1, around $2,150, maybe $2,100 US. It's the creator launcher, built for being simple and easy to carry.
Maximum mobility, minimum fuss. That's the ZV-E1.
Then, right behind it, and this is where things get interesting, is the Nikon ZR. About $0,350 or $2,200. That price difference is tiny compared to the ZV-E1.
Deceptively small.
Yeah.
And especially when you consider the jump-in sort of pro features the ZR is claiming to offer. This is Nikon really trying to shake things up.
Then we take a big step up in price. The Canon C50, that's sitting around $3,800, $4,000, maybe $3,900. Definitely premium price.
But the promise there is workflow acceleration. The idea is you pay more upfront to save potentially thousands on post-production labor down the line.
Okay. And finally, the original standard bearer, the Sony FX3, the worry-free set kit, as some call it. That's at the top, around €4,700 or $4,100.
Yeah, and that price reflects its reputation for reliability, being ready for professional sets, and importantly, it usually comes bundled with a professional XLR audio top handle that's often extra on other cameras.
Right, so that's the financial landscape. 4 cameras, 3 price tiers. Let's dive into what makes each one tick their core design philosophy, because they're not trying to do the same thing at all.
Absolutely. You got to understand the camera's identity first to know if it fits your job. So the Sony ZV-E1, like we said, is that ultra-compact, high-mobility creator tool.
It's just simple, right?
Right. Exactly. Minimize complexity. It leans heavily on AI features, advanced stabilization, auto framing, things designed so maybe you don't need a huge crew or complicated rigs. If you're shooting solo and want the smallest possible package, that's its target.
Okay. Then the Nikon ZR. What's its core identity?
The ZR is proudly, I think, the raw value champion. It's basically taken the guts of a high-end cinema camera, the cinema brain, with that internal raw and put it in a more, let's say, consumer-style body.
Right.
It's specifically aimed at the indie filmmaker who absolutely needs that maximum image flexibility in post, in the grade, but doesn't have the huge budget for traditional internal RAW cameras or external recorders.
So it makes some trade-offs on the body to deliver that core image quality.
That's the deal. It accepts certain ergonomic compromises, which we'll get into, in exchange for that internal R3D RAW capability at that price.
Okay, contrasting that, the Canon C50.
Pure workflow efficiency workhorse. This camera feels like it was designed by agencies and commercial production houses for agencies and commercial production houses. Every feature seems geared towards solving problems on high-volume sets, where you're constantly churning out content for different platforms, TV, web, social media, every single day, and where reliability just can't be compromised. Its higher cost is directly tied to features that save hours, expensive hours, in post-production.
Got it. And the Sony FX3, where does it sit now?
The FX3 holds on to its identity as the reliable low-light all-rounder. Its premium price is essentially an investment in minimizing risk on set.
Peace of mind, basically.
Yeah, peace of mind through active cooling, solid connections, professional card slots, and this is really important. It's proven track record and seamless integration as a B cam with bigger Sony cameras like the FX6 or even the Venice. It just fits into existing professional workflows worldwide.
Okay, identity is established. Let's talk sensors. This is where Sony really made its mark initially, especially with that 12-megapixel approach in the FX3 and ZV-E1. Why is that relatively low pixel count so significant?
It's all about optimizing for low light and video quality. That 12-megapixel sensor allows for a perfect native 4K readout without pixel binning or line skipping.
Meaning
the camera isn't trying to cram data from, say, a 24 or a 30-megapixel sensor down into a 4K file. Oversampling, while good for detail and bright light, can sometimes introduce noise or processing artifacts, especially as the ISO goes up. Native readout tends to be cleaner.
And less rolling shutter, right?
Generally, yes. Less jello effect when you pan quickly. It results in a cleaner, more stable image overall, particularly in challenging light.
And this is amplified by the whole dual-base ISO thing.
Hugely amplified, especially on the FX3 when you're shooting in its professional modes, like S-Log3 using Scene-EI. It has base ISOs of 800 and then a remarkable 12,800.
Okay, hold on. Scene-EI exposure index, that's not just cranking up the ISO setting like on a photo camera, is it? Explain that quickly.
No, it's a fundamentally different way of thinking about exposure, borrowed from high-end cinema. With Cine-EI, you're basically telling the camera how sensitive you want to treat the sensor, but the camera itself is always recording at one of its native base ISOs, 800 or 12,800 in this case, to capture the maximum dynamic range.
So you might set your EI low, like 400, even though the camera's recording at 800.
Exactly. You expose your image based on the EI setting, maybe protecting highlights, knowing that the actual recording is capturing tons of information in the shadows at that base ISO. You then develop the image in post, applying a LUT and adjusting the exposure digitally, kind of like processing film. It maximizes flexibility and dynamic range.
And that second base at 12,800 is what gives it that night vision reputation.
That's the night vision for creators mode, essentially. It means even at extremely high sensitivity, the camera is starting from a relatively clean baseline, engineered specifically for those conditions.
And the sources seem pretty clear if you're regularly shooting above, say, ISO 10,000, that Sony architecture delivers a cleaner image.
Yeah, the consensus is that for really demanding low-light work, the FX3 and ZV-E1 have a noticeable advantage. The images are reported to be cleaner, with less distracting color noise, and the noise texture itself is often described as more organic, more grain-like, easier to deal with in post without mushing out all the detail.
Okay, so how do the Nikon ZR and Canon C50 compare on the sensor front? They have more megapixels, right?
They do. The ZR uses a 24.5 megapixel sensor, and the C50 has a brand new 7K sensor, which is, well, a lot of pixels. Their dual base ISOs are typically lower, off to around 800 and maybe 6,400.
So the trade-off then?
Absolutely. The ZR and C50 prioritize resolution potential. That 7K on the Canon gives you massive open gate flexibility for reframing, visual effects, anamorphic shooting.
Yeah.
The 6K RAW on the Nikon also offers huge post-production latitude.
But they achieve that flexibility potentially at the expense of that absolute top-tier, super high ISO performance.
That seems to be the engineering choice. They're optimizing for detail, for oversampling potential, for cropping flexibility, rather than solely for pushing into extreme darkness like the 12MP Sonys. Above ISO 10,000, you'll likely see more noise or perhaps more aggressive noise reduction on the Nikon and Canon compared to the Sonys.
So if you're shooting mainly in controlled lighting, studios, daytime docs, maybe the higher resolution is more useful.
Arguably, yes. The flexibility from the higher pixel count on the C50 or ZR could be more valuable there. But if your work consistently involves unpredictable low-light concerts, weddings after dark, moody indie films relying on available light, then that Sony sensor architecture, that clean high ISO, is probably the stronger choice.
All right, let's shift gears to codecs and file formats. This is where the Nikon ZR really throws down the gauntlet, right? Changing the economics of RAW.
Completely. The ZR's price-to-performance ratio, specifically regarding internal RAW, is kind of staggering.
So what exactly does it offer?
It offers internal Redcode RAW, specifically the R3D-NE variant, recording up to 6K resolution at 60 frames per second. And importantly, it uses Reddy's well-regarded color science, log3G10 gamma, and red-wide gamut color space.
So this isn't just some generic RAW format, it's actual red code.
Yes, and that's huge. It's essentially integrating a high-end cinema imaging pipeline into a camera body that costs just over $2,000.
What's the practical impact of having R3D specifically? Why does that matter to a filmmaker?
Well, a few things. First, for the indie filmmaker or small production, it's a massive cost saving. You don't need to buy a $1,500 or $3,000 external recorder like an Atomos Ninja or Shogun just to get high-quality RAW files. That's built in.
Okay, that's significant.
Second, using Reddy's color science, red-wide gamut in particular, is a big deal for people who like that look. It's known for having really nice filmic roll-offs in the highlights and good color separation. And third, if you already happen to work within a Red ecosystem, maybe you own or rent a Red Komodo or a V-Raptor, the ZR becomes an almost perfect B camera.
Because the footage just matches easily.
Exactly. Same codec, same color science. It simplifies the post workflow tremendously compared to trying to match cameras from different manufacturers.
That sounds almost too good to be true for the price. Is there a catch? The sources mention something called the hidden codec trap.
Ah, yes. This is where the total cost of ownership, the TCO, starts to bite back with the ZR. While that R3D RAW is undeniably the quality sweet spot on the camera,
The other recording options aren't as good.
the reports suggest that the non-RAW options, like the internal H.265 or even ProRes 422HQ files, could look a bit softer, maybe a bit polished or overprocessed. It suggests the camera might be applying fairly strong noise reduction internally to keep those compressed file sizes down.
So if you want the absolute best image quality out of the ZR, you're kind of pushed towards shooting RAW almost all the time.
That seems to be the implication for critical work, yes. Which leads directly to the TCO problem.
Which is?
Storage.
Yeah.
RAW files are massive. R3D files, while reasonably efficient for RAW, are still significantly larger than compressed codecs, like Sony's XAVC or Canon's XF-AVC.
So the cheap camera body forces you into expensive media and storage.
Precisely. Suddenly you need to buy multiple, very expensive CF Express Type B cards, which are pricier than Type A or SD cards. And you need terabytes upon terabytes of fast RAID storage back at your edit suite to handle all that data. The initial saving on the body gets offset pretty quickly by the ongoing cost of managing those huge RAW files.
Okay, that's a really important point. And it transitions perfectly to the Canon C50 and its workflow turbo. The C50 also does internal RAW, right? Cinema RAW light.
It does, yes. But Canon's main focus with the C50 seems less about just offering RAW and more about saving time in the overall process.
How does it do that? What are the key features?
The big headline feature is its 7K open gate recording. It can use the entire surface of its new 7K sensor, which has a 3.2 aspect ratio up to 30 frames per second.
Open gate. So using the whole sensor, not just the 16:9 crop. Why is that 3.2 aspect ratio useful?
It gives you maximum vertical resolution. This is huge for a couple of reasons. First, reframing in post. You have tons of room to punch in, reposition your shot, or extract both a standard 16:9 widescreen image and a 9:16 vertical image from the same take without losing quality.
Ah, for social media deliverables.
Exactly. But second, and perhaps more importantly for cinematic work, it's ideal for shooting with anamorphic lenses.
How so?
Anamorphic lenses squeeze the image horizontally onto the sensor. When you de-squeeze it in post to get that wide cinematic look, having that extra vertical information from the 3.2 open gate sensor gives you the highest possible final resolution and image quality for your widescreen master.
Okay, that makes sense. But the sources said the real killer feature, the workflow turbocharger, is that simultaneous recording thing.
Oh, absolutely. This is the feature that could make agencies and commercial houses choose the C50 instantly, despite the price. It can record your main high-quality master file, maybe Cinema Raw Light or a high-bitrate XS-AVC codec to the main CF Express Type B card. And at the same time, it can record a separate, smaller proxy file, often preset to a vertical 9.16 or square 1.1 aspect ratio, directly to the secondary SD card.
Wait, so it creates the social media version right in the camera?
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
You can even see on the monitor exactly where that vertical crop is happening on the main image while you're shooting. So the director or DP can frame knowing exactly what the vertical version will look like.
I can see the time saving immediately. If you're shooting a campaign that needs TV spots, YouTube versions, and Instagram stories,
Which is pretty much every campaign these days.
this potentially eliminates hours of an editor having to go back, reframe every single shot for vertical, maybe regrade it slightly, export it separately.
Exactly. If that saves even just a couple of hours of a skilled editor's time per day on a long shoot, that C50 starts paying for itself very, very quickly. It shifts the workload from expensive human hours in post back onto the initial capital investment in the camera. That's the definition of workflow efficiency.
Okay, wow. So how does Sony fit into this codec battle now? The FX3 and the ZV-E1. What's their strategy?
Sony's philosophy with the FX3 has always been about robust, high-quality internal compressed codecs, with RAW being an optional external step.
So strong internal files first.
Right. The FX3 offers excellent 10-bit 4.2.2 internal recording using its XAVC codecs. You get XAVC SI, which is all intra.
Meaning every frame is encoded independently. Easier to edit.
Yes, larger files, but less demanding on your computer's processor during editing. And it also offers XAVC-HS, which uses H.265 compression or long GOP.
Smaller files, but harder to edit.
Smaller files, much more efficient for storage space, but yeah, they require more processing power to decode during playback and editing. The FX3 gives you both options, which is great flexibility.
But no internal RAW. That's the big gap now, exposed by the ZR.
That is the primary feature gap, yes. However, the FX3 does output a very clean 16-bit RAW signal over its full-size HDMI port.
To an external recorder, like the Atomos Ninja V Plus or Shogun.
Exactly. So high-quality RAW is still possible with the FX3. It just requires that extra box and cable. And 16-bit RAW theoretically offers significantly more color information than the 10-bit or 12-bit internal RAW found in some other cameras.
16-bit versus 10-bit. Is that difference actually visible?
In extreme grading scenarios, yes. 10-bit gives you about 1,000 shades per color channel. 16-bit gives you over 65,000 shades. That massive increase in data means you have much more flexibility to push colors around, recover highlights or shadows, or do complex visual effects work without the image starting to fall apart, showing banding or artifacts. It treats RAW as a dedicated top-tier external workflow.
Okay. And the ZV-E1, what's its codec story?
Simplicity itself. The ZV-E1 uses those same excellent internal 10-bit 4.2.2 XAVC codecs as the FX3, which is fantastic for its price point. But fitting its target audience loggers, content creators needing quick turnaround, it offers no RAW capability at all, neither internal nor external, according to the sources.
So it's purely about getting great-looking, easy-to-edit files straight out of camera.
That's the focus. Speed, simplicity, good quality internal files. No messing with RAW workflows.
Okay, so wrapping up this codec section, Canon C50 and Nikon ZR are pushing resolution and internal RAW flexibility, 7K, 6K. Sony FX3 ZV-E1 are focused on clean, efficient internal codecs from that native 4K sensor, with the FX3 offering external RAW as a high-quality option.
Right. If your workflow can handle massive files and prioritizes maximum grading flexibility above all else, you're looking at Nikon or Canon. If you need reliable, clean internal files with minimal fuss in post and maybe optional high-end external RAW, Sony's approach still holds strong.
Makes sense. But, codecs are only part of the story. If the camera itself isn't practical to use on set, if it overheats or the connections are flimsy, none of that matters. Let's talk physical reality, starting with stabilization. Big difference here, right? Handheld champions versus a more traditional approach.
Yeah, a really clear philosophical divide. The Nikon ZR, Sony FX3, and Sony ZV-E1 all feature advanced 5-axis in-body image stabilization, or IBIS.
Which physically moves the sensor to counteract shake?
Exactly. This inherently makes them much better suited for handheld shooting, run-and-gun documentary work, anything where you don't have the time or space for a full rig. The ZR actually boasts up to 7.5 stops of compensation, which is quite aggressive.
And the ZV-E1 adds those AI stabilization modes, too.
Right. It has dynamic active stabilization, which crops in a bit more but is very smooth, and that AI-powered framing stabilizer, which can actually track a subject and keep them centered, even if you're moving around. It's like having a virtual camera operator helping you out.
Okay, so those three are built for handheld, but the Canon C50, no IBIS.
Deliberately omitted. Canon made a clear choice here. The C50 embodies a more traditional classic cinema philosophy. Stability should come from external support. Tripods, gimbals, dollies, Steadicams, shoulder rigs. That's the pro way, in their view.
But it does have electronic stabilization, EIS.
Yeah, it does, yes. Which digitally warps the image to counteract shake. But here's the crucial downside noted in the sources. When you're shooting with standard cinematic shutter angles, like 180 degrees, so 148th or 150th of a second shutter speed for 24-25p, EIS can often introduce a noticeable, slightly artificial, wobbly or floaty look to the footage. It doesn't look as natural or organic as good IBIS, especially for subtle movements.
So for serious handheld narrative work, the C50 might not be the best choice, even with EIS.
It makes it much less suitable, yes. It really pushes you towards using proper stabilization gear, which aligns with its overall professional rig-focused design.
Okay, let's talk audio, another area with a key difference. The solo safety net versus the set standard.
Right. The Nikon ZR pulls another rabbit out of the hat here with a pretty unique feature for this class. 32-bit float audio recording.
Available through
its standard 3.5mm microphone input, and apparently also usable with its internal microphones in a special OZO mode.
32-bit float. What does that actually mean for the user? Why is it a safety net?
Put simply, it offers such an enormous dynamic range for audio that it's practically impossible to digitally clip the recording.
So if you're recording an interview, say a solo shooter scenario, and the person suddenly laughs really loudly or shouts unexpectedly,
and your audio levels were set for their normal speaking voice,
you don't ruin the take with distorted, clipped audio.
Exactly. With 32-bit float, you basically set a reasonable gain level, and even if the sound level jumped dramatically, the recording captures the entire range. You can then go into your editing software, pull the levels down on the loud part, push them up on the quiet part, and it sounds perfectly clean. It removes that constant worry about setting perfect levels in unpredictable environments. It's a massive safety net for solo operators or small crews.
Wow, okay. But the Canon C50 and Sony FX3 stick to the more traditional approach.
They do. Both the C50, which requires an optional audio module for XLR, and the FX3, which typically includes its XLR top handle, feature standard professional XLR inputs, recording high-quality 24-bit audio.
Which is the standard on professional film sets.
It is. It's reliable, integrates perfectly with professional audio mixers and microphones, offers phantom power, multiple channels. It's the expected language of the sound department. But, crucially, neither offers that internal 32-bit float safety net. 24-bit audio has plenty of dynamic range, but you do still need to monitor your levels carefully to avoid clipping.
Okay. Ergonomics and inputs-outputs I/O. This is where the initial price can be misleading, right? The hidden cost is rigging.
Absolutely critical TCO point.
Yeah.
The Sony FX3 and Canon C50 are physically built like tanks, designed for the rigors of professional use. They both feature robust, full-size HDMI ports, Type A.
Which are much less likely to break or wiggle loose than micro or mini HDMI.
Much less. They also have professional secure card slots. The FX3 has dual slots that accept either CF Express Type A or standard SD cards, offering flexibility and redundancy. The C50 has a CF Express Type B slot and an SD card slot, and crucially, it can record to both simultaneously for backup or those proxy files we talked about. Plus, both have plenty of solid 1/4-20 mounting points. They're essentially rig-ready out of the box.
Less risk of failure, less need for extra cages just to protect things.
Exactly. Now compare that to the budget contenders.
The Nikon ZR and the ZV-E1.
The Nikon ZR presents a real paradox. Amazing image quality, 32-bit float audio, but the physical design have compromises. It uses a micro HDMI port, Type D, which is notoriously fragile and easy to damage on set.
Yeah, those are scary.
And then there are the card slots. It has a fast CF Express Type B slot, which is good, but the second slot is only a slow micro SD card slot. This doesn't offer true video redundancy. You probably can't record high bitrate video to both simultaneously. And worse, both slots are located inconveniently inside the battery compartment on the bottom of the camera.
On the bottom, so if you mount a tripod plate or put it on a gimbal?
You can't access the cards or the battery without completely dismantling your rig.
Yeah.
Take the camera off, open the bottom door, swap things out, put it back on, rebalance. It kills momentum on set.
Which means?
It means a protective cage, specifically one that includes an HDMI clamp to secure that fragile micro HDMI port and maybe relocates access or provides alternative mounting. Isn't really an optional accessory for serious professional use of the ZR. It's practically mandatory.
So you have to add that $150, $200, maybe $300 cage cost right back onto the initial $2,200 price tag?
Instantly.
Yeah.
It eats into that value proposition and increases the real TCO. The Sony ZV-E1 has similar physical limitations, a micro HDMI port and only a single SD card slot, offering no redundancy at all. That aligns with its vlogging focus, but it's a significant risk for any kind of paid client work where losing footage isn't an option.
Okay, last physical point. Thermal reliability. Keeping cool under pressure. This is huge for long takes.
Absolutely fundamental for professional use. You need the camera to roll when you hit record and keep rolling. Here again, we see a split. The Canon C50 and the Sony FX3 provide the highest level of security because they both feature integrated active cooling fans.
Little fans inside the body.
Yep. This means they can actively dissipate heat, guaranteeing thermal reliability even during very long takes. Think hour-long interviews, live event streaming, shooting high frame rates like 4K 120p, even in hot environments. That peace of mind, knowing the camera won't shut down due to overheating, is a big part of why they command a premium price.
Okay. And the passively cooled cameras, the ZR and ZV-E1.
They rely on heat sinks and the camera body itself to dissipate heat without a fan. The Nikon ZR is reported to be surprisingly good for a fanless camera. Sources suggest it can often record at 6K RAW for over 100 minutes without hitting thermal limits, although Nikon cameras often have a hard file duration limit around 2 hours anyway.
And the benefit of no fan is silence.
Absolute silence, which can be critical on quiet narrative sets where even a faint fan noise could be picked up by sensitive microphones. So there's a trade-off. The Sony ZV-E1, being so incredibly small and tightly packed, is understandably the most susceptible to overheating, especially if you're pushing it with long takes at 4K 60p or the demanding 4K 120p mode. Users need to be really mindful of ambient temperature and recording durations with the ZV-E1 for critical work.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground. Design philosophies, sensors, codecs, the physical realities. Let's try to synthesize this now. If the goal is to pick the camera that best solves your specific production bottleneck, which one should you choose? Let's start with the indie filmmaker or the solo operator.
Right. If your primary concerns, your biggest bottlenecks, are the initial budget for the camera body and getting the absolute maximum image quality via internal RAW for grading flexibility.
And the Nikon ZR seems like the obvious choice.
Overwhelmingly, yes. It delivers that internal 6K red RAW at an almost unbelievable price point. Combine that with its strong IBIS for handheld work, the huge safety net of 32-bit float audio for unpredictable sound, and its nice, bright 4-inch screen. It really supports that one-man band approach where you need maximum quality and security while working alone or with a tiny crew.
Even with the ergonomic hurdles like the micro HDMI and bottom card slots.
You accept those hurdles and the cost of a cage in exchange for that core RAW capability. However, if those physical compromises or the burden of handling huge RAW files feel like bigger bottlenecks for you,
then the alternative for the solo shooter is
the Sony ZV-E1. It's the pick if your priorities are different. If extreme portability, best-in-class low-light performance thanks to that ISO 12800, fast turnaround with great internal files, and those helpful AI features like auto-framing are more important than RAW or having redundant card slots or robust I/O.
Okay, next use case. The busy agency or commercial production team. Lots of content, fast turnarounds, multiple platforms.
For this specific environment, where the biggest bottleneck is almost always time spent in post-production dealing with multiple deliverables,
the Canon C50 is the clear winner.
it really seems engineered precisely for this problem. That combination of 7K open gate giving you reframing flexibility and, crucially, that simultaneous dual recording spitting out ready-made vertical or square social media crops alongside your master file. That's a direct attack on post-production hours.
Saving time equals saving money, especially with agency rates.
Exactly. The C50's higher initial cost is quickly offset by the massive time savings in post, making its TCO potentially lower in this high-volume context. It's the workflow turbocharger.
All right. And finally, the traditional professional set. Maybe long-form documentaries, corporate videos, narrative work where absolute reliability is paramount. Or maybe as a B cam on a larger production.
Here, the established benchmark, the Sony FX3, likely remains the top choice for many. If your primary bottleneck is mitigating risk, the risk of overheating, the risk of data loss, the risk of poor low-light performance, the risk of incompatibility on a set dominated by other Sony cameras,
then the FX3's features justify its price.
yes. The active cooling provides thermal security. The robust full-size HDMI and dual professional card slots minimize I/O failures and data loss. The proven low-light performance and professional Cine Eye workflow are trusted quantities. And its seamless integration as a B cam with the FX6, FX9, or Venice is a huge factor on professional sets. It represents the lowest risk, most reliable package overall, even if it costs the most upfront.
And we should add that B-cam note again. While the FX3 is great for Sony sets, the Nikon ZR becomes a really compelling B-cam specifically for RAD productions because of that native R3D codec, right?
Absolutely. If the A-cam is a RAD, the ZR slots in almost perfectly from a codec and color perspective, which is a unique advantage for it.
So looking at this whole picture, it's really striking how this 1-2 punch week from Nikon and Canon has suddenly put Sony, the longtime leader in this space, under some serious pressure.
Massive pressure from two different directions. Sony basically created this high-end compact cinema market with the FX3 and FX30, and now it's being attacked on its core strengths.
How so? Let's break down the pressure points.
Okay, first, the Nikon ZR directly attacks the FX3's value proposition. By offering internal red RAW for significantly less money, it makes the FX3's lack of internal RAW look like a major omission, especially given the FX3's high price. It asks the question, why pay almost double for less codec flexibility internally?
Right. Pressure on price and features.
Then simultaneously, the Canon C50 attacks the FX3's workflow efficiency, particularly for commercial work. By introducing that open gate sensor and critically the simultaneous social crop recording, Canon delivered tangible time-saving features that modern workflows demand, features that Sony currently doesn't offer in the FX3 or ZV-E1.
So Sony's getting squeezed on both value RAW capability by Nikon and workflow efficiency by Canon. They have to respond, right?
They absolutely have to. And the sources we looked at actually suggest a pretty clear multi-stage strategy Sony could and perhaps should take.
What's the first step? What can they do now?
Immediate action needs to come via firmware updates for the existing FX3 and ZV-E1. They need to try and close that workflow gap with the C50 as quickly as possible.
Like adding that simultaneous recording feature.
Exactly. Prioritize developing and releasing a firmware update that enables dual record, plus social crop proxy, allow users to record a defined vertical or square proxy file to the second card slot on the FX3, or maybe even internally on the ZV-E1 alongside the main XAVC file. That would be a huge step.
What else via firmware?
Standardize the professional monitoring tools. Bring robust, false color and waveform monitors consistently across both the FX3 and ZV-E1 lines, and also share the smarts. Bring the ZV-E1's really effective auto framing and tracking stabilizer features over to the FX3 and even the FX30. That adds immediate value for solo shooters using the Pro bodies.
Okay, so firmware first. What about longer term? New hardware?
Yes. The midterm requires a proper product refresh. Sony likely needs a successor to the FX3. Let's imagine an FX4 concept specifically designed to address the core architectural gaps exposed by Nikon and Canon.
What would this hypothetical FX4 need?
Firstly, it probably needs to move beyond the 12MP sensor to match the competition's flexibility. So inclusion of a 6K sensor, crucially with open gate 3.2 capability, recording at least 6K up to 30p. This directly counters the C50's reframing and anamorphic advantages.
And the RAW issue.
That's the other huge one. The FX4 absolutely needs internal compressed RAW. Whether Sony develops its own lightweight format, licenses Pro RAWs internally, or even uses their own XOCNLT from the Venice line, they need an internal RAW option to compete directly with the ZR's R3D.
While keeping Sony's strengths.
Critically, yes. This FX4 must retain the things Sony does well. Reliable active cooling, the full-size HDMI port, robust build, probably dual CF Express Type B slots for speed and redundancy, and ideally still offer excellent 4K 120p.
Makes sense. What about the ZV-E1? Does it need a refresh too? People seem to love its size, but the Pro limitations are clear.
Yeah, the ZV-E1 is super popular, but has those compromises. There's room for a ZV-E1 Pro concept, maybe. Something that keeps the small form factor, but addresses the key professional shortcomings.
Like adding...
Definitely adding a dual card slot, probably 2 SD card slots to keep the size down, and a much brighter LCD screen, something closer to the ZR's 1500 nits, because the current ZV-E1 screen can be hard to see in bright daylight.
And the audio. Can they compete with the ZR's 32-bit float?
Maybe not internally in that tiny body, but they could develop a new XLR adapter accessory, maybe the successor to the K3M handle, that incorporates internal 32-bit float audio recording. Make float audio a high-quality accessory feature for both the ZV-E1 Pro and potentially the FX line. That counters the ZR's unique selling point there.
So firmware, new hardware. What about messaging? How should Sony talk about their cameras now?
They need to shift the conversation. Stop focusing solely on technical specs like native 4K resolution, which the competition now challenges. Instead, emphasize the outcomes and TCO. Talk about time saved through efficient codecs and workflows. Talk about risk reduction through proven reliability, active cooling, dual slots, robust I/O. Hammer home the idea that while the FX3 might have a higher initial price, it represents the lower risk and potentially lower total cost solution for professional paid client work where failures are expensive.
Because lower risk means less chance of costly reshoots or delays.
Exactly. In a professional context, reliability is value. And that's where Sony can still differentiate itself strongly. #outro.
Wow. Okay, so after that deep dive, what's the main takeaway for you, the filmmaker or creator listening right now? It seems clearer than ever that there's no single best camera here.
Absolutely not. The choice is completely dependent on your specific needs and, crucially, identifying your biggest production bottleneck. Which problem are you trying to solve most urgently?
Right. So if your bottleneck is getting that maximum raw image flexibility for grading, but you're on a tight budget for the camera body itself, then the Nikon ZR is probably your champion, even with its quirks.
If your biggest headache is the sheer amount of time spent in post-production, especially dealing with all those different versions for social media, web, and broadcast,
then the Canon C50, despite its price, might actually be the most cost-effective solution in the long run because it directly tackles that time bottleneck.
Yep. And if your absolute priority, your non-negotiable, is rank-solid reliability on set, avoiding overheating, ensuring data security, getting class-leading low-light performance, and fitting seamlessly into existing professional Sony workflows,
then the Sony FX3, the incumbent, still holds its ground as the proven lower-risk choice for high-stakes professional work.
And the ZV-E1, its job is to remove the bottleneck of size and complexity for that solo creator who needs to be incredibly mobile and get great results easily.
So the market has really specialized. You really need to be honest with yourself about what your workflow actually demands.
Which leads to a final interesting thought to leave you with. A provocative question, maybe? The Nikon ZR and the Canon C50 have now firmly established internal RAW and open gate with multi-deliverables as mainstream expected features in this compact cinema space.
They've raised the bar.
They absolutely have. So is the next non-negotiable baseline standard for this category going to be the combination of all three key pillars: open gate flexibility, internal RAW capability, and reliable active cooling? Will cameras need all three just to compete seriously in the near future?
That really puts the pressure on everyone, especially Sony, to integrate all those capabilities into their next generation.
It certainly seems like the direction the market is heading, and incredibly quickly. So again, look at your own needs. Is it low light? Is it handheld freedom? Is it delivery speed? Is it raw grading potential? Match the tool to your bottleneck.
Great advice. Thanks for breaking all that down.
My pleasure. Until next time, keep shooting and keep thinking about your workflow.